Good day, sir. I'll be discussing about comparative analysis between Anselm and Aquinas. I've been trying to wrap my head around the arguments of Anselm and Aquinas, two thinkers who have really shaped how we think about God. They both tackle this massive question: does God exist? And their approaches were so different. It's been a real roller coaster for my brain. I felt like if I talk it through, if I try to explain it like I'm talking to a friend, it will help me determine my understanding. So, I'm going to walk through my detailed understanding of Anselm's ontological argument, where I will unpack this idea that the very concept of God implies God's existence. Then I will dive deep into my exploration of Aquinas' cosmological arguments, where he looks at the world around us, at every factor of our experience to find evidence of God. And finally, I will spend time on my personal reflection and the challenges I face in accepting Anselm's argument compared to Aquinas's, including addressing potential counter arguments that I have encountered. This is not just about me presenting information, it's about sharing my process of wrestling with these ideas, of trying to make sense of them. So let's begin with Anselm. I have to admit, his ontological argument really threw me for a loop. It's fundamentally a thought experiment. It's like a mental puzzle, a logical game. He starts with this definition: God is greatest conceivable being. So, what does it mean? It means the most perfect, most powerful, most amazing thing I can possibly imagine. Let's take a concrete example. Imagine the perfect, most beautiful sunset I've ever seen. Now, Anselm says God is even greater than that. Here's the crucial part. He argues that if God only exists in my mind, in my imaginations, then I can imagine something even greater, a God that also exists in reality. Because think about it, would not something real be greater than something imaginary? So for Anselm, the very act of me thinking about God, of me having that concept in my head, necessitates that God must be real. It's like if I think of the most perfect, most fulfilling relationship, it has to exist somewhere, even if it's just in my imagination. So Anselm applies this to God, saying the greatest thing has to exist in reality too. Now, let's address a common counter argument that I have come across. Many people say, but just because I can imagine something, it doesn't mean it exists. And that's a valid point. I can imagine a unicorn, a flying car, a world without suffering, but that doesn't make them real. Anselm would argue that God is a unique case. He is not just an imaginary object. He is the greatest conceivable being. And the very definition of greatest includes existence. So it's not just about me imagining something. It's about the inherent logic of the concept itself. I remember when I first read this, I was completely confused. I kept thinking, this feels like a trick. How can you just define something into existence? It felt like I was trying to create something out of nothing. But then I realized it's not about empirical evidence about seeing or touching God. It's about the power of human reasoning, about exploring the limits of logic. It's a fascinating exercise in abstract thought, even if I ultimately disagree with it. So now, let's turn our attention to Aquinas. I find this approach much more grounded. He was all about looking at the world around him and everything I can see, touch, and experience. He developed these arguments called cosmological arguments, which are based on our observation of the cosmos, of the universe. One of his famous arguments is the argument of motion. He observed that everything that moves is moved by something else. Think about a bicycle. It moves because I pedal it. A ball rolls because I kick it. He said, this chain of movement can't go on infinitely. There has to be a first mover, something that started the whole process, and that, according to him, it is God. So let's think about this is a larger scale. Imagine the planets orbiting the sun. What started that motion? Aquinas would say, it's God. I think of this as asking, what is the ultimate source of motion in the universe? It's a question that resonates with my innate curiosity about the origins of everything. Another key argument from Aquinas is the argument from causation. He noticed that everything has a cause. My laptop here, my laptop is here because someone designed and built it. Our seminary is here because someone built it and used materials that other people made. So here is an there has to be a first cause, something that caused everything else, and that's God. Each action has a cause, and Aquinas argues that this chain of causes ultimately leads back to God. To me, this argument highlights Aquinas' focus on the interconnectedness of everything in the world. So the fundamental difference between them is their starting point. Anselm starts with the concept of God itself, just the idea. Aquinas started with the world around him, with I can see and experience. Anselm's argument is a priori, meaning it's based on pure reason, independent of experience. Aquinas' arguments are a posteriori, meaning they are based on experience on what I observe. And I think Anselm's argument is more challenging for a lot of people, including me, because it's so abstract. It's all in the realm of pure thought. People say, but what if my concept of God is flawed? What if I'm imagining something that is not really God? That's a valid question. And that is why Aquinas' arguments feel more relatable to me, because they are grounded in the world I live in. But I do find both approaches incredibly valued. Anselm's argument shows the power of human reason, the ability to explore profound questions through pure thought. And Aquinas' arguments show how I can try to find meaning and purpose in the natural world, in the things I experience every day. I think both ways of thinking offer profound insights, even if they lead to different conclusions and create different levels of comfort for me. So, to conclude this extensive exploration, I have truly enjoyed delving into the arguments of Anselm and Aquinas. They both sought to prove God's existence, but they approach in it such fundamentally different ways. Anselm used pure logic, focusing on the concept of God itself, while Aquinas used observation of the world around him. But their arguments have a profound and lasting impact on Western philosophy and theology, and they continue to spark debate and discussion today. I think the most important takeaway for me is that they both encourage me to think deeply about these fundamental questions. They remind me that there are different ways to approach the question of God's existence, and that the journey of exploration itself is incredibly valuable. Thank you, sir.